A very good evening and welcome to Prime Time News here on TV1. You're joining me, Devi Paldano. Now, before we head into your stories in more detail, let's first take a look at your headlines this evening.
Vasantha Mudalige released from PTA charges due to lack of evidence. However, returned to remand custody for 3 other cases. Supreme Court permits the examination of the petition filed by Anuruddha Bandara, who promoted #GoHomeGota. Multiple factions threaten severe action if the government does not reverse its unjust tax regime. Government minister says MP is also economically challenged and warns of no IMF relief if taxes are revised. President issues orders to further curtail government expenditure. Former President Sirisena apologizes to the victims of the Easter attacks. Bangladesh secures $4.7 billion from the IMF with an immediate disbursement.
Now, taking a look at one of your headline-making stories. The Colombo Chief Magistrate was critical of the police for abusing the Prevention of Terrorism Act and for failing to provide credible evidence to support the accusations against IUSF convener Vasantha Mudalige. The Colombo Chief Magistrate today ordered the release of the convener of the Inter-University Students' Federation, Vasantha Mudalige, from the charges filed against him under the provisions of the Prevention of Terrorism Act. Colombo Chief Magistrate Prasanna Alves emphasized that there was no evidence to claim that Vasantha Mudalige or the Inter-University Students' Federation had committed offences punishable under the PTA.
Vasantha Mudalige was arrested under the Prevention of Terrorism Act 166 days ago, and he spent 90 of those days under the detention orders obtained under the PTA. Investigations were carried out against him for 7 separate incidents under the provisions of the PTA, and the Terrorist Investigation Division informed court that 60% of the investigations were complete. Detectives have recorded statements from 150 individuals, and an evidence record of 41 of those statements were produced to the court. Colombo Chief Magistrate Prasanna Alves, delivering the verdict, said that investigations carried out on the assumption that money was funneled via international terror organizations had failed to produce any evidence. The Colombo Chief Magistrate also noted that though it was said that the Inter-University Students' Federation attempted to add violence to the Aragale, those facts could not be accepted due to the absence of any evidence to prove the claim. The court ruling also made note of the charge claiming that Vasantha Mudalige had dragged a police officer and obstructed his duty during the protest held opposite the Ministry of Education. The Colombo Chief Magistrate emphasized that there was insufficient evidence with regard to the said incident. In the verdict, it was stated that there was no eyewitness records or any other evidence regarding the charges against Vasantha Mudalige for damaging public property, and the Terrorist Investigation Division had failed to present sufficient evidence to prove that Mudalige had made religious or racist statements. The Colombo Chief Magistrate had noted that the PTA had been abused in the incident, where it was alleged that Mudalige had threatened and intimidated a police officer, as the police officer and a fellow officer did not file a complaint on the matter at the first instance, and that they only provided statements to the TID. It was also stated in the ruling that the statement given to the Thalangama police station alleging that Mudalige had shoved a Western Province intelligence officer against a green wired fence and pulled his hair and removed his mask had no facts. In addition, the detectives also failed to prove the charge against Mudalige for allegedly pulling the Fort Police OIC by his uniform and obstructing his duties. Further, the Colombo Chief Magistrate noted that the evidence given by a Fort Police officer over the said incident was contradictory. However, as cases are ongoing for 3 other charges, Mudalige was returned to remand custody.
Vasantha was released from the charges filed under the Prevention of Terrorism Act. In addition, we have filed a motion to call for several other cases that were filed with the Fort Magistrates Court under the normal law and hope to reveal the truth behind those cases. Court did not rule on bail for those cases as he was detained under the PTA.
මූලික වශයෙන්ම ත්‍රස්තවාදය වැළැක්වීම පනත යටතේ ඔහුව රඳවා තබාගෙන ඉන්න නිසා. ත්‍රස්ත පනත යටතේ නිකරුණේ
The souls of many who were arbitrarily detained under the PTA were released today. This struggle does not end here. We wish to warn the officials that if they led false evidence on the instructions of others, be prepared, as the legal fraternity will come after you.
තමුන්ලගේ පස්සේ නීතිඥ ප්‍රජාව විදියට අපි එනවා.
For the first time in history, a ruling was delivered following a careful study of the Prevention of Terrorism Act. It was revealed how the police officers acted to please the needs of the rulers. Evidence was provided to the extent claiming that they need to detain him further under the Prevention of Terrorism Act. The police should start to fear, because the day in which they lose their stripes because of their actions to please the rulers is not far away. Activists from the Inter-University Students' Federation engaged in a silent protest opposite the Colombo Chief Magistrate's Court when IUSF convener Vasant Mudalige was escorted to the court. The Kesalwata police had sought an order from court to prevent the silent protest from continuing, citing that it inconvenienced the public. However, Colombo Chief Magistrate Prasanna Alvis rejected the request and advised the police to act as per the powers vested with the Sri Lanka police if the protest was in fact an inconvenience to the public. The Colombo Chief Magistrate pointed out that court orders were not necessary for it.
Protests took place opposite several state universities demanding the release of Vasanta Mudalige, and one protest took place opposite the Open University of Sri Lanka in Navala.
This is a program that provides leadership to the student movement. It can never be destroyed. Throughout history, we have taught lessons to successive governments.
The student union of the Sabaragamu University of Sri Lanka also engaged in protests. University students marched from the university premises to the Pambahina Junction in protest.
Vasanta Mudalige has been detained for approximately 160 days. It is clear that his detention is politically motivated. We will not allow this to continue. The people are struggling to survive and they are spending millions on Independence Day. As Sri Lankans, we must see to it that the struggle emerges victorious.
The International Federation for Human Rights alleges that Sri Lankan authorities systematically violated international human rights laws and standards with complete impunity in their crackdown on the Aragalaya. FIDH Secretary General Adilur Rahman Khan said that President Wickremesinghe's recent pledge to use the military and emergency powers to prevent resurgence of a protest movement should sound alarm bells. He added that it is imperative the international community remains vigilant and presses the government to respect and protect the rights of the protesters. The 62-page report titled Anatomy of a Crackdown, the Repression of Sri Lanka's Aragalaya protest movement provides a comprehensive record of the serious and systematic human rights violations committed by the military, police and pro-government elements against the overwhelmingly peaceful protesters. On journalists, it noted that on the 9th of July 2022, during a protest in front of the then Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe's private residence, 8 reporters from the privately owned national TV channel Newsfirst were attacked by police. The report said that all 4 reporters wore recognizable Newsfirst t-shirts and were carrying journalist accreditation cards on them when the attack took place, and that 4 other Newsfirst journalists who attempted to aid their injured colleagues were also assaulted by the police. The most disturbing pattern of violations of the right to freedom of peaceful assembly was the authorities' frequent use of unnecessary and or disproportionate force, including live ammunition, tear gas and water cannons to disperse peaceful assemblies. Authorities also imposed unnecessary and disproportionate restrictions on assemblies through the use of emergency powers and the abuse of laws, including the draconian Prevention of Terrorism Act. The report is released ahead of Sri Lanka's 4th Universal Periodic Review, which will take place on the 1st of February 2023 in Geneva, Switzerland.
The fundamental rights application filed on behalf of 8 journalists of MTV Channel Private Limited over the assault carried out against them on the 9th of July 2022 was taken up before the Supreme Court earlier today. Journalists Sarasi Piris, Varuna Sampath, Janitha Mendis, Judin Sinthujan, Imesh Sutherland, W. Veerakon, K. Chandran and Lahiru Madhushanka Arachi have been named as petitioners. The matter was taken up in the presence of a bench comprising Supreme Court Justices Buwaneka Aluvihara, S. Ture Raja and Mahinda Samyawadana. the State Council informed the Supreme Court that he would be appearing for the Attorney General on the instructions of Deputy Solicitor General Kanishka De Silva. In addition, the State Council informed that he would be appearing on behalf of the first to fourth respondents, namely IGP C.D. Wickramaratne, Senior DIG Varuna Jayasundara, Senior DIG Deshabandhu Tennukun and SP Romesh Liyanage. The State Council also noted that the preliminary objections on behalf of the aforementioned respondents have been filed. President's Counsel Ronald Pereira was appearing on behalf of the fifth respondent, SSP Nizam Jamaldeen, and he informed the Supreme Court that he too filed objections. The two police constables who are listed as the sixth and seventh respondents in the fundamental rights application filed on behalf of the 8 journalists were represented by attorney Dushit John Dasan, and the objections he filed in open court were handed over to the petitioners. President's Counsel Udita Igaleheva, appearing for the petitioners, informed the Supreme Court that counter objections have been filed in response to the objections filed by the first to fifth respondents. He also reserved the right to file counter objections to the objections filed by the other respondents. The Supreme Court ordered for the fundamental rights application to be called up again on the 26th of February to establish facts. President's Counsel Udita Igaleheva appeared on behalf of the 8 petitioners with Damita Karunaratne, Niranjan Arul Pragasam, N.K. Ashok Baran and Muru Igaleheva, instructed by Attorney at Law Charika Vaniga Baduge.
The Supreme Court on Tuesday granted permission to examine the fundamental rights application filed by social media activist Anuruddha Bandara, who challenged his arrest, where he was taken into custody for promoting the hashtag #GotaGoHome. The petition was called up in the presence of Supreme Court Justices Vasantha Kodagoda and Arjuna Besekara, the Inspector General of Police, Senior DIG in charge of the Western Province, the Attorney General among 12 other factions were named as respondents in the application. The Supreme Court bench noted that it was evident that the petitioner's freedom of speech and expression, the right not to be arrested except according to the procedure established by the law, and the right to equality before the law that have been enshrined in the Constitution of Sri Lanka have been violated. President's Counsel Salia Piris along with attorney Tanuka Nandasiri appeared for the petitioner, and they noted that the petitioner seeks a compensation of 10 million rupees from the respondents.
The University Teachers Association of the Rajadhara University called on the Athamasthanadipati, the most venerable Pallegama Hemaratana, to inform him about the government's unjust tax policy.
The University Teachers Association of the Rajadhara University briefed the Athamasthanadipati, Venerable Pallegama Hemaratana Thero, on the government's unjust tax policy.
අසාධාරණ ලෙස වෘත්තිකයන්ගෙන් බදු වැටීමක් සිද්ධ වෙනවා. අපිට දරාගත්ත නොහැකි මට්ටමක බදු ප්‍රමාණයක් අය. දැනටත් අපි බදු ගෙවනවා. නමුත් දැන් අපි ගෙවන බදු ප්‍රමාණය වගේ දසගුණයකින් ආයෙත් වැඩි ප්‍රමාණවලින් සමහර අයට බදු මාසිකට ගෙවන තියෙන බදු ප්‍රමාණය වැඩි වෙනවා.
අද ඔයගේ අමතිවරු කීප දෙනෙකුත් එක්ක කතා කළා. මේකෙන් වෙන්නේ මේ ප්‍රශ්නේ මුක්තවාකාරයකට අවුල් වෙනවා. රටම අවුල් වෙන ප්‍රශ්නයක් මේක. රට අවුල් වුණොත් ප්‍රශ්නේ මුල තියෙන්නේ කොහෙද කියලා හොයාගන්න බැරි වුණා. ඒ නිසා මේකට නැවත වාරයක් ඉවරට කල්පනා කරලා අතු ගන්න ඕනේ හරියට. නමුත් මේ ප්‍රමාණය පිළිබඳව බොහෝ දෙනෙකුගේ අනසල්ලක් තියෙනවා. ඒ නිසා යම් සංශෝධනයක් කරන්න පුළුවන් නම් හොඳයි කියන එක අතරම අපි කතාව කරලා කිව්වා.
වෘත්තිකයල දෙන සියලුම ප්‍රතිලාභ වලට වැටුපට අමතරව
they want to tax all the benefits enjoyed by the professionals, but politicians are getting more benefits from the government. They get millions as benefits, however, nothing is said about it. Politicians are commenting on the taxes that they should pay. We are engaged in social service. Professionals are also social workers. We can challenge the 225 parliamentarians to work for 1 week. Nothing will happen in the country. However, if 2 million workers step out, the country will collapse.
සතියක් වැඩ වරන්නකෝ. රටට කිසි ප්‍රශ්නයක් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. හැබැයි මේ රටේ ඉන්න මිලියන 2ක් වෙච්ච වෘද්ධිකයෝ
The All Ceylon Health Services Union has decided to launch a month of protests from the 1st to the 28th of February against the government's unjust tax regime, as well as a shortage of medicine, medical supplies and staff.
We have launched a trade union action and there needs to be an end to it. We call for talks so that we can discuss and solve the issues. There is no point in delaying this. We will launch a new struggle from the 1st of February, centering all the hospitals in the country. We will launch continuous protests from the 1st to the 28th 28th of February.
ඊයේ මධ්‍යම රාත්‍රී වන විට ශ්‍රී ලංකා ජාතික රෝහල තුල සියලුම X-ray පරීක්ෂණ නැවතිලා තිබෙනවා.
All X-ray devices from the Colombo National Hospital stopped working with effect from midnight yesterday. The government introduced a computer system where the X-ray image can be obtained through PCs or laptops with facilities from doctors and health staff to go through them. However, the entire process has come to a standstill. The Health Ministry has not even paid the due amount to the respective company and they suspended the service with effect from midnight yesterday. We asked the people if they can continue to cope up with this situation. Will they engage in the struggle to bring a leadership that will respond? Cabinet spokesperson Minister Bandula Gunawardena said that all 225 MPs will have to pay taxes as well.
The tax will also apply to all 225 parliamentarians. The salaries and allowances together will be taxed. Our fuel allowances will also be taxed. If we own a house, that too will be subject to a tax. The President is holding talks with the Finance Minister on the possibility of awarding relief. Like it or not, if we do not enter into an agreement with the International Monetary Fund and if we do not prepare a debt repayment program, the Sri Lankan economy will not last even a month.
The President has ordered to further curtail government expenditure in a note to the cabinet.
The revenue collected from all avenues is 158.7 billion rupees. The total expenditure stood at 368.7 billion rupees. Anyone could understand that we cannot spend 368 billion rupees with only 158 billion rupees as revenue. The deficit was breached by obtaining loans and by issuing treasury bonds and treasury bills along with an overdraft assistance delivered by the central bank. This is the reality. Our expenditure is more than double of what we generate as income. The President noted that all ministry secretaries are committed to manage these expenses. They have signed an agreement to control these expenses and work towards facing this tough situation.
අමාරු අවස්ථාවේදී කෙටිකාලීන වශයෙන් තිබෙන මේ දරුණු අර්බුදයට මුහුණ දීම සඳහා එකතු වෙන්න කියන.
මේසර නිදහස් දිනය සමරීම සඳහා රජයේ වියදම ගැන පැහැදිලි කරන්න පුළුවන්ද?
මේ මහා වියදම් ප්‍රමාණය සමග සාපේක්ෂව සැසඳීමේදී අවුරුද්දකට සැරයක් පවත්වන.
Compared to big expenses, the cost for the annual Independence Day is very low. However, a government cannot simply suspend the Independence Day celebration. This is a global tradition. Every country celebrates its Independence Day in a grand manner. We cannot say that we are not ready to spend for this tradition. No matter what hardships we face, we cannot slash the funds for Parliament, the functioning of the judicial system and other projects of national importance.
කියන්න පුළුවන් කමක් නැහැ අපිට අමාරු ජාතික වැදගත්කමක් තියෙන වෙනත් ව්‍යාපෘති සඳහා දරන.
The International Monetary Fund has approved loans of $4.7 billion to Bangladesh for their dispersal starting immediately, making it the first to secure such funds out of 3 South Asian countries that applied last year amid economic trouble. Sri Lanka reached a staff-level agreement with the IMF on the 1st of September last year. However, Bangladesh reached its staff-level agreement on the 9th of November last year. Bangladesh will get about $3.3 billion under the IMF's extended credit facility and related arrangements with an immediate disbursement of about $476 million. IMF Executive Board also approved about $1.4 billion under its newly created Resilience and Sustainability Facility for climate investments for Bangladesh, the first Asian country to access it.
We're going in for a short commercial break. Stay tuned for more of the very latest.
News First, main sponsor.
Dardens Hospital, dedicated to you. Experience the best in healthcare at Dardens Hospital's new Alfred Place wing. We continue to evolve into a purpose-built hospital of the future, with an ambience built to deliver world-class care. Dardens Hospital, dedicated to you.
Welcome back to the news. The collective of national organizations requested the Askeri chapter of the Siam sect to prevent the attempts being made to fully implement the 13th Amendment to the Constitution.
Retired Rear Admiral Dr. Sarath Veerasekara, Governor of the Eastern Province, Anuruddha Yahampath, former Secretary to the Prime Minister Sudat Gunasekara and other representatives of the collective of national organisers called on the Mahanayaka of the Askeri chapter of the Siam sect, Most Venerable Varakagoda Sri Gnana Ratana Thero.
පොලිස් බලතල දුන්නේ ජයා ජයවර්ධන අගමැතිතුමාව ප්‍රේමදාස අගමැතිතුමාව සරුතා මැතිණියව ඉන්ද්‍රාජ පක්ෂව ගෝඨාභය මෛත්‍රී පාද සිද්ධ මේ කවුරු දුන්නේ නැහැ. නමුත් මෙතුමා දැන් මේක දීම තුලින් දෙන්නේ ඒ රට අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම අර තියෙන ගැටුම්සාගත තත්ත්වය අපිට තේරෙනවා. නමුත් අර විරව ප්‍රකාශයක් කරන්නට තවත් ටිකක් සාකච්ඡා කරන්නට අවශ්‍යයි. මම හිතන්නේ ජනාධිපතිතුමා විගාස් දිනේදී ප්‍රකාශයක් කරන්නේ නැහැ. ඒ න්‍යාය පත්‍රයේ කතාවක් නැහැ. මම හිතන්නේ දැන් පාර්ලිමේන්තුවත් කල්දාපු නිසා 8 වෙනිදා තමයි මම හිතන්නේ එතුමා මේ රාජාසන කතාව කරන්නේ ඒකෙදී මේ පැහැදිලි කරයි. ඉතින් මෙතෙන්දි මේ විදිහ භයානක තත්ත්වෙක වෙන්න පුළුවන් මේ රාජාසන කතාවේදී මෙයා මේක කරලා තුනෙන් දෙක අනුමැතිය ගත්තොත් ඒක ව්‍යවස්ථාවක් වෙනවා සාමාන්‍යයෙන්. ඒම වුණොත් මේ රට පිටිලේ කරා.
අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනා මේ ලබන සතිය තුළ ජනාධිපතිතුමා පැමිණෙයි කියන දැනුවත් කිරීමක් දැනට මූලික වශයෙන් තිබෙනවා. ඒ නිසා අපේ මහා විහාරයේ පමණක් නෙවෙයි අනිකුත් නායක හම්බන්තෝසේලාගේ වගකීම් සහිත මේ ගුණාංශත් සමග සාකච්ඡා කරලා මේ වෙනකොටත් අපි මූලික වශයෙන් සාකච්ඡාවට දීර්ඝ කරලා තිබෙන්නේ. මූලික අදහසක් ගන්න. ඒ අදහස අරගෙන එතුමාට අපි පිළිබඳව විවෘතව එතුමා සමග සාකච්ඡා කරලා අපේ අදහස ඉදිරිපත් කිරීමට අපේක්ෂා කරනවා.
In another one of the headline-making stories, former President Maithripala Sirisena apologized to the victims of the 2019 Easter Sunday attacks.
මම විශේෂයෙන්ම අවුරුදු 15 16 තමයි බයිබලයේ කියවෙන්නේ. අවුරුදු 15
As a person who read the Holy Bible since age 15, I sincerely apologize for such a tragedy taking place during my tenure, and I apologize to those who died and were injured. I also apologize to the Catholic community for this tragedy which took place during my tenure while I was not aware of it beforehand, and for the loss of life.
මම කිසි දෙයක් දන්නේ නැතුව මෙවැනි ත්‍රස්ත ප්‍රහාරයක් එල්ල වෙලා මගේ පාලන කාලය තුල මෙවැනි ප්‍රහාරයක් එල්ල වෙලා ත්‍රස්ත ප්‍රහාරයක් එල්ල වෙලා මේ ජීවිත විනාශ වීම පිළිබඳව
Maithripala Sirisena also announced that he will contest the presidential election.
එක කාර්යයක් මම කියන්නට ඕන නෙල්සන් මැන්ඩෙලා දකුණු අප්‍රිකාවේ නායකයා 27 අවුරුදු
Nelson Mandela was the former leader of South Africa. He was imprisoned for 27 years. After his release, the people of South Africa made him the president. Therefore, I would like to state that I will not back down from anything. I do not fear the conspiracies. No matter what obstructions I have to endure, with the support of my party, I will contest the upcoming presidential election and I will win it. I say this because there is a lot of criticisms about us.
කීයක් හම්බ වුණත් මට ජයග්‍රහණය කරන්න පුළුවන් කියන විශ්වාසයක් උඩ මම ඉදිරි ජනාධිපතිවරණයක් තරඟ කරනවායි කියන එක මම බොහොම පැහැදිලිව කියන්නට ඕනේ.
All trade unions in the Ceylon Electricity Board will engage in a mass protest on the 8th of February against the new tax regime.
ජාත්‍යන්තර මුල්ල අරමුදලෙන් කිව්වේ සාධාරණ බදු ප්‍රතිපත්තියක් ක්‍රියාත්මක.
The International Monetary Fund told to implement a reasonable tax policy and not hunt a select group of taxpayers and increase taxes for them. This is not a reasonable policy. They are trying to justify the taxes imposed on us by stating that they are unable to pay the salaries and unable to deliver medicine to the hospitals and are unable to pay the pensions. However, they would never state that they are unable to pay the salaries of ministers and state ministers as well as pay for fuel for their convoy of vehicles. They are not stating that they are burdening us with these taxes to cover up their waste. The IMF has made it clear that corruption must be minimized. The people need to understand if that has happened, if the professionals and workers are expressing such dismay about the government.
අකමැත්තක් මේ රජයේ වෘත්තිකයෝ නැත්නම් අනිකුත් සේවකයෝ පළ කරනවා නම්
අද ආණ්ඩුවට වැලේ වැල් නැහැ. එල්ලෙන වැලක් නැහැ. නන්නත්තර වෙච්ච ආණ්ඩුවක් තියෙන්නේ.
The government has lost its ways. The parliament is like a group of sea pirates and a band of rogues. Those in parliament can be termed as those who are surviving by ripping off the public.
කාලා ජීවත් වෙන නරුම පිරිසක් අද මේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ ඉන්නේ.
The National Election Commission called for a meeting to discuss directives to prevent the abuse of public property for election propaganda.
Officials of state institutions were summoned to the Election Commission for this meeting. Commissioner General of Elections, Samantri Ratnayaka, said the heads of media organizations were also summoned to discuss media guidelines, while commissioners of local government institutions were also summoned to the Election Commission. Political political parties have launched their campaign for the local government elections. Opposition leader Sajith Premadasa addressed a public meeting of the Samagi Jana Balawegaya held in Matugama electorate in the Kalutara district. He said that the government is planning to tax even those whose monthly income exceeds 45,000 rupees.
Today, the government, to cover its own inability, is taxing excessively without managing the economy properly. We have come to know that this government has promised the IMF to tax those whose monthly income exceeds 45,000 rupees. You should not deal with the IMF without being firm, keeping their back straight. Today, both the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna and the United National Party are dancing to the tunes of the IMF. They will do anything the IMF says. I say one thing to the IMF. I declare this time that the government of the Samagi Jana Balawegaya is not bound to implement any agreement or promise made to the international financial institutions by this government or the president who does not have a mandate.
ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්නට සමගි ජන බලවේගයේ ආණ්ඩුව බැඳිලා නැහැ කියන එක මම
A public meeting organized by the National People's Power was held in Lahugala.
If you give the National People's Power a proper mandate in the upcoming Provincial Council elections, we will assure you that we will dissolve this parliament within 2 months. Our win in this Provincial Council election will set out the tone for us to win the next national election. Even if we win the national election, still the National People's Power will have to work with Ranil Wickremesinghe. But you should not forget that this president was elected by a majority vote in parliament. It is ethically wrong for the president to remain in his seat when the very same parliamentarian group who appointed him are sent home by the people. Leave this to us. We need a change that will stop the corruption in this country. Only a government led by the National People's Power can bring you this change.
A Sri Lankan has been bestowed with the prestigious Freedom of London Award.
Sri Lankan-born Lucian Fernando was presented with the prestigious Freedom of London Award. Councillor Lucian Fernando is a product of St Benedict's College, Colombo. Honorary freedom is the highest honour the City of London can bestow on an individual. It is one of the oldest surviving traditional ceremonies still in existence today and is believed to have been first presented in 1237.
The inaugural CXO Forum of AmCham Sri Lanka took place today in Colombo. The theme for this year was Unlocking 2023.
Unlocking 2023, a forum on innovative leadership, was organised by AmCham Sri Lanka to provide macro and micro factor insights that inspire and empower leaders to effectively lead their organisations and communities.
Today, the American Chamber of Commerce held their CXO Forum Unlocking 2023. The forum focused on the opportunities available for the Sri Lankan economy regarding recovery, export and increasing FDI.
An economic snapshot, a panel discussion that identifies and discusses the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats to the Sri Lankan economy in 2023 was also organised.
Inflation, we must remember, is something that affects the poor much more and the vulnerable much more adversely than it affects people who have wealth and have the ability to hedge against that inflation. So those who are the purchasing power of people who are on fixed incomes gets hammered as a result of that. So even though it is obviously a very difficult and painful thing to go through, I would say that the alternative is a lot worse from a policy perspective. So I think there is a period of pain in this situation and the interest rates, a similar thing would apply, right? You need to have a degree of monetary tightening in order to control, to bring inflation down. So I think from that, the macro policy from fiscal and monetary, you have this short-term pain in order to prevent what is a significantly worse outcome, if not.
We have had the executive system of presidency since 1978, and when you juxtapose it in relation to the economic performance, it's a system that probably has not worked for Sri Lanka, because the system is designed for a benevolent dictator, but we are waiting for a Lee Kuan Yew, but as the world has seen, for every Lee Kuan Yew there are 50 Robert Mugabes. And the thing is, from a cultural context, because you're concentrating so much of power in one person's hand, and the way elections are run in this country, It is not based on merit or policy making ability, but it's highly divisive politics, racial politics, there are tribal politics. So you're never going to get the best person in that position, and therefore when you concentrate so much on power, the person who will end up holding that chair through an electoral process will not be this highly competent technocrat that you want.
This was followed by an investment snapshot, a panel discussion on the investment climate and opportunities for Sri Lanka on 2023.
If we're looking for foreign investment, what we have to understand is that both parties and all parties have to benefit in some way, shape or form. We can't take everything as a country, we can't take everything as a local private sector, they can't get everything as an investor. There's an element of give and take. If you look at the way foreign investors are typically treated, it's like if you look at a shop, you advertise the shop, you try and attract your customers, you get the customer in, and then you don't really treat them very well. You try and sell them substandard products, you try and take more from them than they're giving you. You try and make it difficult, you put barriers to entry to prevent them from buying the products that they want to buy. This is not conducive for the objective that we're trying to achieve.
And with that, we wrap up Primetime News here on TV1. For more news, log on to our website, that is www.newsfirst.lk. For the Newsfirst team, I'm David Paldano. Take care and good night.
Newsfirst, main sponsor.
Darden's Hospital, dedicated to you.
Across all walks of life, listening to the people, visiting door to door, witnessing the truth firsthand. This is the heart of the village. Gametha. For the people, by the people.
TV1. TV for life.
අයිබෝවන් ඔබ ද පීපල්ස් ප්ලට්ෆෝර්ම් සමගින් තව දින කිහිපයක